Um, just before the start of the pandemic, Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, made headlines for her emotionally vulnerable and honest response to a simple question from a British television reporter, Tom Bradby. In a quiet moment during an on-camera interview, Bradby asked her, "How are you doing?" And the world kind of stopped for a moment when she opened up to him with a sigh and tears and said that she really wasn't doing so well and how appreciative she was that he thought even to ask the question. I've been thinking a bit about that moment these last few weeks, in part because it was pre-pandemic and our worldly concerns, even those of an American pregnant woman of color, new member of the royal family, seemed relatively quaint compared to the burdens and the worries that we all have confronted these past 13, 14 months. But there is more to it than just reflecting on life pre and mid COVID. That question, how are you doing? It comes to mean something much deeper than the throwaway greeting that it was before the world turned upside down. Personally, I ask that question of people, and I really want to know, how are you doing? And if they're doing any better than me, which, to be honest, on many days is not a very high bar to overcome. And if they are doing better than me, I want to know, how are they doing better than me? What is their secret? Please share, because this is hard. It's wearing on me. And because I talk to dozens of you who I can only imagine through this screen right now, I'm not even seeing myself in the moment, I know that it's wearing on you too. Think about just one thing as an example. Think about our emails for a moment. Because for a while now, we have not been bumping into each other on the street or exchanging, "Hi, how are yous?" If we're bumping into people on the street, we're actually doing this whole social distancing thing wrong. So email is actually, for most of us, and Zoom, but email in particular, our moment of connection. My emails that I receive from people and those that I send tend to begin with this: "I hope you're well. I hope this email finds you healthy. I hope you and your family are healthy and safe during these uncertain and unprecedented times." And if you keep an active email account, like I do, you have likely received a note that includes a phrase like that, maybe in just the last few hours or even minutes, let alone the past year. And you've probably sent one of those as well. We all have this ubiquitous experience that all of us are going through and getting through to varying degrees. Claire Goggins-Sivitz, a digital marketing consultant who's based in Portland, Oregon, just south of us, she wrote, "You kind of feel like you have to start every email with that kind of line. And if you don't, you feel guilty." Goggins-Sivitz, who sometimes writes freelance for online publications, including, as I was reading, a lot of them about beer, described a recent exchange in which she emailed an editor and forgot to include those kinds of well wishes. And the editor replied to her email that she, the editor, hoped that Goggins-Sivitz was doing well, staying healthy, and staying inside. Goggins-Sivitz wrote, "I thought, oh man, I totally left that out of the email that I sent her." And so we can add feeling guilty for not having enough left in the tank to express empathy to others, to the self-inflicted wounds that we carry during COVID. In this week's Torah portion, Kedoshim, we read the powerful and imperative verse, "Ve'ahavta l're'echa kamocha," love your neighbor as yourself. For 20 years as a rabbi, I have been giving sermons on this parsha. I almost used one of them again tonight. I'm not, I wrote this today, but I do have a rule, and that is that if I don't remember giving it, you won't remember hearing it. Generally, by the way, that rule has proven to be true. But in 20 years of expounding on this verse, I think in nearly all of them, I have focused on the re'echa part of the passage. Love your neighbor. In those sermons, love of self was really just a measure of how much we should love and care for others. But not tonight, not during COVID. Loving ourselves and before we care and worry about others, that too is part of the commandment. And maybe right now it's the most important part. Self-care has maybe never before been more important than in the midst of a pandemic, when so much more than our physical bodies are endangered. And now, more than 1 year into this pandemic, when our natural and instinctive resources for guarding and protecting our mind, body, and spirit may feel depleted, When a third wave is cresting, the answer to the question, how are you doing? If we are honest with ourselves, let alone others, is, I'm not doing so good. I can't do this much longer. I am so done with COVID, but apparently COVID isn't done with us. It's at this moment that love and care for self is more important than ever. The Babylonian Talmud states, if there is anxiety in a person's heart, let that person quash it. Yashihina. Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi dispute the meaning of this verse. One said they should forcefully push it, Yashihina, out of their mind. And the other said they should tell Yasihina others. This ancient text recognized that an important form of self-care is to share our concerns, our fears and our anxieties with those around us. In fact, it prioritizes those healing actions over trying to cope with anxieties on our own, especially coping with them by quashing them or repressing them. And so the reporter then asks the Duchess of Sussex, how are you doing? And she answers him honestly, not many people have asked if I'm okay. She sighs. The weight of all of it, before Oprah revealed all of it to us, is apparent in that sigh. And tears well up in her eyes, and she continues, it's a very real thing to be going through all of this behind the scenes. And we know what all of this is. That honest telling of our truth to others, that's what the Talmud is talking about. That's the first step in self-care. Often we think of self-care as an action, going to the gym, a massage, coffee with a friend. I think self-care is deeper than that. But even still, those are the very things that we can't do right now. We are so often taught that nonstop action and achievements, that they are the key to a successful life. Yet our tradition teaches us that in fact, stopping, pausing, and recharging must be a priority. Take tonight, this moment right now, for example. All week, as Rabbi Brown mentioned, has been glorious outside. We went on walks, we sat in our gardens, watched the sunset, and tonight it's cold. As I write this, the forecast is rain, and if it's not raining, it's gonna rain, which is not so hard to forecast in Vancouver. But us, we're at home. We're on our sofa, maybe with our iPad, maybe laying in bed watching services, listening to the beautiful and inspiring melodies of Cantor Corn, the teachings of Rabbi Brown, and I'm probably lulling you to sleep right now. There's something for everyone. Shabbat is one of Judaism's most prolific, most universal, most core and defining traditions, one that unites us across identity and observance. In the earliest words of Torah, the very beginnings of Genesis, we read, on the seventh day, God finished the work that God had been doing, and God ceased on the seventh day from all the work that God had done. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it kadosh, declared it holy, because on it God ceased from all the work of creation God had done. God creates a protected space in time whose only purpose is to be a holy day of rest. No matter one's interpretation of Shabbat observance or even of God and commandments, we can see lessons and messages in our core Jewish text. Shabbat amounts to taking a step back and desisting from interfering with our world's ever-moving cogs and wheels. Shabbat calls for a moratorium on our weekly pursuits to fill every moment that we have with Zooms and emails and phone calls, not on Shabbos. Productivity on Shabbat amounts actually to distancing ourselves from the mundane, disconnecting from the world, being less productive, focusing on those in closest proximity to ourselves. Indeed, focusing on ourselves. Shabbat asks us to answer for ourselves. How are you doing? And this puts us on a path and a quest to achieve spirituality. Just as our tradition says, and we said at Seder, Dayenu, it would have been enough, it is enough, so must we. In today's nonstop world, this idea is so countercultural, almost impossible to comprehend. For many, it's actually anxiety producing and provoking. If we're not doing, then who are we? This moment of crisis, when so many of us are forced into a state of retreat, it could also be, it has been, I think, an incredible opportunity to mull over and actualize some space and to shift focus into self-care. But only if we're honest with ourselves, only if we're vulnerable enough with ourselves to be honest with others about how we're really doing. Not so that they can help us, but so that in telling them, we can hear ourselves. Consider the vulnerability of stopping to honestly and thoughtfully answer that question as the Duchess of Sussex did, as our Talmudic rabbis did. Consider it as an act of self-care, an actual response to the general insanity of this moment. Consider it as a specific action that we can take. Another step, another prayer that should be in our prayer book. Dear God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Acceptance, courage, and wisdom. And I would add a fourth, the humble vulnerability to be honest when asked about all of the above. Now, if this message tonight that I've shared with you touches on something that needs attention in your own soul, then as Rabbi Brown mentioned in our announcements, this Sunday at 1 o'clock, the Vancouver Jewish Federation, Jewish Family Services, in partnership with all of the synagogues and all of the agencies in our community, we're offering a seminar with clinical psychologist, Dr. Betsy Stone, who, as Rabbi Brown mentioned, teaches pastoral care at Hebrew Union College, the seminary that Rabbi Brown, Cantor Korn, and I each attended. The seminar is entitled A Year of Upheaval: What Has Trauma Done to Our Bodies and Our Brains? And the link is on the temple website to sign up. This Shabbat, ask yourself the question, how am I doing? And then through the workshop or through services, with the help of people in your bubble, or with us, your community, your Klei Kodesh, your rabbis, listen for the answer and the self-care each of us needs, especially right now. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will, and may each of us find Shabbat Menucha, Shabbos rest and peace. Shabbat Shalom.